Dinner was supposed to be the quiet part of the day. No uniforms, no ranks, no orders. Just my brother across the table, teasing the waiter about burnt toast, laughing like the world wasn't heavy. I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. Then the door opened. Hard. Too hard. 6 men walked in like they owned the air in the room. Not rushed, not nervous, the kind of confidence that comes when people think no one will stop them. One of them pointed at my brother. "Stand up, you're under arrest." Time slowed. The fork slipped from his hand and hit the plate. That sound cut deeper than any gunshot I've heard in combat. I stood up immediately. "I'm an Army officer," I said. "What's the charge?" They didn't answer me. They didn't even look at me. They grabbed my brother while he was still chewing his food. That's when I felt it. Not fear, rage. The quiet kind that soldiers learn to control. My brother looked at me, confused, not scared, just lost. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. No one answered him either. They handcuffed him right there, in front of strangers, phones raised, judgment already written in people's eyes. I followed them outside. I demanded names, badge numbers, paperwork. Nothing. Just one sentence thrown over her shoulder. "Stay out of this." That sentence told me everything. At the station, they made me wait like I was nobody, like my service didn't matter, like the uniform I've bled in was just fabric. Hours passed. When I finally saw my brother through the glass, his shoulders were still straight, but his eyes were different. That broke something in me. They accused him of crimes that didn't make sense, financial links, communications he'd never had, people he'd never met. I asked one question: who benefits from this arrest? That's when the room changed. Because innocent arrests don't create tension, guilty systems do. I pulled his records that night. Clean. Too clean. Not even a parking ticket worth mentioning. Which meant one thing. He wasn't arrested for what he did. He was arrested for who he was connected to. Me. Someone didn't like where I'd been deployed. Someone didn't like the cases I'd testified in. Someone didn't like that I didn't stay quiet. So they went after the one person I couldn't ignore, my brother. By morning, word started spreading quietly. Not online, not publicly. Inside offices, inside hallways where doors closed fast. Calls stopped getting returned, emails stayed unread, and suddenly everyone was on leave. That's when I knew this wasn't local. This was organized. They released my brother without charges, no apology, just a warning wrapped in a smile. "Tell your sister to be careful." I walked him out into the sunlight. He didn't ask questions. He just said one thing that still echoes in my head. They wanted me scared. And that's when I made a decision. I stopped being polite. I stopped asking. I started documenting everything. Because when power moves in silence, the only weapon left is exposure. Someone thought arresting a man during dinner would end a problem. They were wrong. Because now, every step they take is being watched. And the story they tried to bury, it's only just starting to breathe. After they released him, we didn't go home. Home didn't feel safe anymore. We sat in the car with the engine off, just listening to our own breathing. My brother kept rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been, like his skin was trying to remember freedom. "I didn't tell them anything," he said suddenly. I looked at him. "They kept asking about you, about places you've been, people you've testified against. They already knew the answers. They just wanted to hear it from me." That's when the weight really settled in. They hadn't arrested him to investigate. They arrested him to measure me, to see how fast I'd react, how far I'd go, how loud I'd get. That night, I sent him somewhere no one could trace easily. No phones, no routine, no digital footprints. Old instincts kicked in, the kind you don't explain, you just follow. Then I went back to my empty apartment. I laid my uniform on the chair, folded, perfect, untouched. And for the first time since this started, I let myself sit in the dark. Anger came first, then guilt, then something colder than both. Focus. By morning, I had timelines mapped out. The arrest, the call logs, the unmarked car parked across the diner 2 days earlier. Yes, I noticed that too. Soldiers notice patterns, because patterns get you killed if you ignore them. Someone had been watching us before the arrest. Someone patient. I requested the authorization officially. Denied. I requested it unofficially. That's when I received a text from an unknown number. Stop digging. He's free. Be grateful. Grateful? I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I forwarded that message to 3 different places and printed it out. Threats lose power when they leave the shadows. By afternoon, a senior officer from my unit called me in. Not angry, not supportive, careful. He warned me, off the record, that my name had started circulating in rooms I wasn't invited to, that my emotional involvement made me unreliable. Classic move. When facts don't bend, they attack the person holding them. I nodded, thanked him, walked out. Outside, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my brother. They drove past the house, he whispered, slow. That's when I stopped pretending this was still a warning phase. They weren't watching anymore. They were waiting. I made another decision, one I'd avoided until now. If they wanted to turn this into a test of endurance, I'd turn it into a countdown. Because people who operate in secrecy make mistakes when pressure rises, and pressure rises fastest when the truth starts leaking in controlled drops. Not a flood, drops. Enough to make them panic. Somewhere, someone is realizing arresting a man during dinner didn't scare an army officer into silence. It trained her attention. And the more attention I give this, the closer they get to slipping. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because fear had already done its job and left. What stayed behind was awareness. I replayed everything in my head like combat footage. The way the officers entered the diner, the timing, the confidence, the absence of hesitation. This wasn't a spontaneous move. This was approved. Somewhere, someone signed off on ruining a normal evening to send a message. And messages like that are never meant for the person in cuffs. They're meant for the one watching. By sunrise, I had 3 new pieces of information. First, the arresting unit had been temporarily reassigned 2 weeks before the incident. That doesn't happen without reason. Second, the paperwork trail stopped and restarted twice. Someone had edited the digital record after the arrest. Third, a name kept appearing in indirect ways. Not officially, not boldly, but like a shadow that always showed up just outside the frame. I didn't say the name out loud. Names carry weight when you're ready to use them. My brother called again later that morning. They asked me something strange, he said. What? They asked if you trusted me or feared me. That question told me more than any document ever could. They weren't just collecting information, they were studying loyalty. I told him to answer truthfully if anyone ever asked again, because truth, when repeated consistently, becomes a weapon they can't twist. By afternoon, I noticed the shift. No more direct pressure, no more messages. Instead, distance. Doors closing softly, conversations stopping when I entered rooms, people choosing silence instead of threats. That's not confidence, that's recalculation. I went back to the diner alone. Same table, same chair my brother had been sitting in. The staff recognized me, but didn't ask questions. People avoid questions when they already know the answers are heavy. I sat there for a long time, not remembering the arrest, but what came before it. Laughter, food, normalcy. That's what they interrupted. That's what they underestimated. When you attack someone's normal life, you don't scare them into submission. You strip away the illusion that silence keeps you safe. I paid the bill and stood up. As I walked out, I felt it again. Eyes. Not close this time. Not obvious, but present. Good, because that meant they hadn't walked away. They were watching the next move, and so was I. I sent one final message that evening, not to threaten, not to expose, just a single sentence delivered through the right channel. You chose the wrong family. No response came back, but I didn't need one, because silence, when it follows contact, means someone is thinking. And thinking leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to mistakes. And mistakes are where the truth finally steps into the light. The mistake came sooner than I expected. It always does when people believe they're smarter than the consequences. 2 nights later, my access badge stopped working. No warning, no explanation, just a red light where green had always been. I didn't argue, I didn't react. I simply noted the time. Because when systems shut you out quietly, it means someone inside is afraid of what you might still access. I took the long way home that evening, changed routes twice, walked the last 3 blocks instead of driving. Old habits, survival habits, the kind you don't explain to civilians. Halfway down the street, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. No words this time, just a photo. It was my brother, from behind, entering a grocery store earlier that day. Time-stamped. That wasn't a threat. That was proof. They wanted me to know they could still reach him. My grip tightened around the phone, but my breathing stayed slow, controlled, because panic is what they were hoping for. I didn't give it to them. Instead, I forwarded the image to a secure folder and added it to the growing archive. Everything they did was becoming part of a larger picture, one they couldn't see yet. That night, I finally told my brother the truth. Not everything, just enough. I told him this wasn't about a mistake, it wasn't about confusion, and it wasn't over. He didn't interrupt me. When I finished, he nodded once and said something I wasn't prepared for. "Then stop protecting me," he said. "Use me as proof." That's when I understood something important. They thought family made me weak. They were wrong. Family made me precise. The next morning, a formal notice appeared in my inbox. Administrative review, pending reassignment, restricted communications. Clean language, carefully written, designed to look reasonable to anyone who didn't know how pressure works. I signed nothing. I responded with one sentence. "Please confirm this order in writing with full authorization." The reply never came. Instead, the world around me shifted again. A journalist I'd never contacted requested an interview. A former colleague warned me not to trust anyone offering help. And someone, somewhere, started erasing digital traces faster than they could explain why. That's when the pattern became obvious. They weren't preparing to fight. They were preparing to disappear. And people only disappear when they know the ground beneath them is about to collapse. I stood by the window that night, city lights flickering like distant signals. Somewhere out there, someone was making decisions in a hurry, cutting corners, trusting the wrong people, rushing. Which meant the next move wouldn't be clean, it would be sloppy. And sloppy is where truth leaks. They thought arresting my brother during dinner would end this quietly. Instead, it taught me exactly how far they were willing to go, and exactly how far I would have to follow them. By the time the sun came up, I already knew something was coming. You don't survive long in uniform without learning how silence changes before impact. The air feels heavier. People hesitate when they shouldn't. Systems slow down on purpose. I got a call from a number that wasn't saved, but I recognized the pause before the voice spoke. Careful, measured, practiced. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," the man said. I asked him one thing. "Then why are you still watching my brother?" Another pause. He talked about misunderstandings, about internal corrections, about how this could still end quietly if everyone stayed reasonable. Reasonable. That word always shows up when powerful people are losing control. I told him, calmly, "You don't get to decide how this ends anymore." The line went dead. An hour later, I noticed 2 things at once. First, my brother was being followed again, this time badly. Different car, same mistake, too close. Second, someone leaked partial information to the press, not enough to expose the truth, just enough to twist it. They were testing a narrative. That confirmed it. They weren't trying to stop me anymore. They were trying to outpace me. I met my brother briefly that afternoon. No hugs, no emotion, just clarity. "They want you scared," I told him. "I know. That's why I'm not." He looked tired but steady.
That steadiness terrified them more than panic ever could. As night fell, I organized everything one last time: files, timelines, names, connections, each piece ready to surface if something happened to either of us. This wasn't just a story anymore, it was a countdown. And if you're listening to this right now, understand something. Stories like this don't go viral because they're dramatic. They spread because they're real. Because somewhere out there, someone else has been silenced. Someone else has been taken in the middle of an ordinary moment. Someone else is still waiting for the truth to catch up. So if this story is holding your attention, if you feel that tension in your chest, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Not from me, but because stories like this only survive when people choose to hear them. Because the next part of this story is where mistakes start becoming public. And once that happens, there's no going back.